For the sake of brevity, I'm gonna get straight to the point instead of addressing every individual point about this one. Alfie Kohn's The Case Against Competition is an important read for people to go through. No Contest, The Case Against Competition is an important book for somebody to read. And, the reason why I come down on this side of the aisle and debate that I do and say the things that I do about things is that I live in a society in which competition has become one of the bedrocks, notions of its society, where, as Alfie Kohn says, there are two respectable positions on competition in our society. Either there's unqualified endorsement or there's, hedged endorsement, and qualified endorsement. But there's very few people come out and say that the whole fucking structure of competition is inherently unhealthy and that there's no way to, square the circle into such a way in which it would be a healthy exercise for us to go through. And that the ideal amount of competition in any scenario in our society is none. Very, very few people are going to come out in that in that side of the camp in our society, because that is one of the cherished beliefs about our society. In our society cherishes competition, and so to question it is to go against the tide of what America cherishes as far as its beliefs are concerned. But to me, what strikes me as intuitively obvious about this set of scenarios and questioning competition as an idea is a very fundamental and very obvious concern that is so obvious that it strikes me as bizarre that it even needs to be stated into the record what that thought is and what that belief is about things. But that is essentially that if a society is going to cherish a value or a belief or a concept or whatever it is that it cherishes, then, and turn that into some part of the culture's most cherished and essential beliefs and the bedrocks of that civilization and its value system, then it should be very careful about what values it seeks to reproduce and that it puts in those bedrock assumptions that have built up its society. The truth of the matter is that very little and very few of the people who have come out defending it and everything have, demonstrated a willingness and a curiosity about anything in order to, question, this stuff. To this person, for instance, I would say, game theory at a fundamental level doesn't ultimately reflect reality. It really just affects game theory, but that's just it. It's all a game, so it doesn't really apply to the real world. You can't learn anything that way. I mean, what he says right here is a textbook example of a rationalist coming forward and telling an empiricist, based on my logical suppositions, I know you're wrong, when the empiricist has results and they just have logic. The results are more important than the fucking, quote unquote logic of the rationalist. But anyways, I I am left with the this person thinks that he can just basically debunk it by by doing this by posting a bunch of links to a bunch of libertarian blogs. I mean, the whole problem. And then this idiot is like, Speaker denied the existence of equanimity in competition and equated competition with aggression. I would never take advice from a person who viewed the world but so reductive personally. I mean, this is an idiotic comment right out the gate, because in order to even talk about things like this, it's necessary to oversimplify somewhat. If we had to go over every individual branch and every possible objection in order to to even make any statements about anything, then we might as well just shut up and say nothing ever about anything. What gets me, though, in all of this and about this exercise in questioning competition is that it has attributed so and gained so little in the way of scrutiny that it's almost shocking how little any of this has had in questioning, other than just that this is what a bunch of people confuse for rationality, that this is what the society we live in tries to reinforce, and that it defends and that it reproduces at every level on purpose because that's what our society is designed to do. You know, it's designed to try to foster this kind of competitive nature in us and to waken it up. I mean, what gets me and gulls me about all of it is that at the end of the day, if I want to live in a society that is highly successful and its success is understood and can be replicated outward wise, then I should be very careful at the end of the day, and my society should as well, about what values it chooses to, emphasize, cherish, and reproduce. Unfortunately, when it comes to competition, I find that so little in the way of scientific scrutiny and questioning and a willingness to question it in a way in which that there's anything at stake that could be, competition could be falsified and it could be proven to be a destructive concept, it has been welcomed by the society. To which, if competition is healthy and is so much so, then the overwhelming weight of the scientific evidence should be able to strengthen this position ultimately. You would not find yourself in a scenario in which there was empirical evidence that, competition was healthy. If, it would strengthen the position. But if you find a bunch of empirical evidence that it's inherently destructive, then, the case for it is a lot weaker for it and everything. And what, and this is what galls me, is that a society and civilization and Uncle Sam should be very careful and cautious about what beliefs he or our society chooses to cherish at the end of the day. Competition is now in that place in our society where it is one of our society's bedrock cherished belief systems, but so little scrutiny was ever applied to it before it got into that position that it is truly staggering, and stunning. And this is what galls me at the end of the day. If we don't behave in a manner that is cautious about what we take into our bedrock values system, and that we turn into the values that our society is supposed to reproduce, if we are not careful and cautious about that, we might end up taking on beliefs and values that are toxic, that are bad for us, and lead to the destruction of our society. So, because of the fact that it is an existential matter that basically is about whether we will, or whether our civilization will survive or die on the vine, we need to be careful and proceed with extreme caution about what our society reproduces and what it decides to turn into its cherished beliefs. For this reason, competition is rife to be questioned by somebody as an idea, because of the fact that we find it in America's bedrock value systems and part of its identity and core value system. Because we find it there, it needs to be questioned more than other concepts and ideas. In fact, even the ideas that we are up against and that we oppose should face less questioning than the ones that we cherish. The ones that we cherish should face the most questioning, because only the values that are the best for our society and its people, and produce the most healthy outcomes for for the individuals that comprise our society, should make themselves into the bedrock of the value systems of our society. Unfortunately, competition has snuck in there without much of anything in the way of actual questioning of it, and a willingness in the American people to be wrong and to have their values at stake and basically proven wrong. They so little has been seen in that to that effect that in a free society and everything, and it's truly staggering. I mean, we live in a pretty free country and everything, and we're free to basically do as we want. But again, to me, if you're going to have the metaphorical sacred cow, then that sacred cow should face more scrutiny than the values that we're against. Because like I said, I mean, if we don't do that, if we don't put it through that scrutiny, the danger is that we'll value something that is self-destructive, and that ultimately in the end leads to our destruction at our own hubris. We'll go down the way that the Atlanteans and Atlantis were said to be, to go down, that where our hubris will end up destroying us, because we didn't have the nerve to subject our values to, the right level of scrutiny.